Her baby, 2 years old, was injured. We're just ordinary Lebanese. They're doing another Gaza here. Why are they doing this?
Since we've been in Tyre over the last few hours, we've seen very, very empty streets, houses and shops boarded up, a lot of damaged cars, a lot of glass. The city is really looking like a war zone. On our way in, we saw the site of another recent strike. Cars had been flipped over on their sides, trees had been ripped up, and there was a massive crater. This city has already been hit hard. Those who remain here, and that's not many, know that there could be worse to come. Israeli troops are now on the ground in southern Lebanon, and the war is moving into a new phase.
And that was our senior international correspondent Ola Guerin reporting from southern Lebanon. More on this story coming up in just a moment. You're listening to Newshour.
And you're listening to the BBC News Hour here on WNYC. Coming up later today on All of It, if you felt the nerves watching the vice presidential debate last night, you're not alone. Alison Stewart speaks with Dan Harris, host of the 10% Happier podcast, about election anxiety and how to manage your stress through Election Day. That's All of It coming up today at noon here on WNYC. It's 60 degrees now, expecting partly sunny skies today with a high of 68.
With the enhanced WNYC app, you can do it all. Listen to WNYC Radio Live, catch up on podcasts, and read stories from Gothamist and NPR. Download the WNYC app at wnyc.org/app.
WNYC supporters include the Metropolitan Opera. The Met's new season features the company premiere of Janine Tesori's Grounded, followed by revivals of Puccini's Tosca, Verdi's Rigoletto, and more. Learn more at metopera.org.
This is James Menendez with NewsHour live from the BBC. Well, staying with our top story, let's hear a view now from the Iranian capital, Tehran. The government has already warned of further attacks if Israel retaliates and warned the United States not to get involved. Sadek Zibakalam is a professor of political science at Tehran University who has been critical of the Iranian government in the past. First of all, was he surprised by the decision to attack Israel?
I was baffled. I was shocked. I was astonished. Like many other Iranians, we thought that this will not happen because it's a very dangerous and it's a very risky step. When it comes to the question of military balance, obviously Israel is stronger than Iran militarily in the air, and firing missiles and using advanced technology, etc., etc. So I was a bit, not a bit, but very surprised. So was everyone else who I talked to. Well, I went to Tehran University today, and everyone was talking about it, and everyone was very surprised because no one thought that this will happen.
Are people worried about the consequences of this then?
Yes, they are already worried. They are already worried, knowing Netanyahu and the right-wing government in Tel Aviv. They're waiting to see what his response would be. And then the ball is in Iran's court again. Would Iran, they ignore it? Will Iran reply? And then it would be Israelis' turn to reply. So everyone is worried about the consequences of what might eventually take place between Iran and Israel.
Who do you think made the decision to launch this missile barrage? Because at the UN in New York a few days ago, it seemed that the Iranian president was reaching out to the West to try and restart negotiations to ease sanctions, Western sanctions on Iran.
Let's put it this way. If Iranian supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei would not have agreed, no missiles would have been.
Okay, that FDNY trailer ahead of me, incident management team, is on the edge of causing an incident because the trailer's fishtailing a little bit too much every now and then. So they probably need to slow down. They're doing 65, I think, something like that. like. No, actually, they're doing 70, almost 70. Interesting that there's 3 of them here in a row.
It appears that the Iranian Supreme Leader, the Revolutionary Guard, and the Iran...
And another one up ahead, so clearly FDNY is either doing some incident team exercises or some incident team maintenance or something like that. There's not a big incident in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or whatever that they need to go to right now, as far as I'm aware.
And that there is any confrontation between Iran and Israel next second, United States would be at Iran's door, and the confrontation would not only between Iran and Israel, but it will be between Iran and the United States.
And could that mean a possible attack, do you think, on Iran's nuclear facilities? Are people talking about that?
Yes, apparently Iran's nuclear facilities would be the first target for Israel and for the United States. Goodness knows where it might end up.
And that was Professor Sadek Zibakalam speaking to me from Tehran. So how might Israel respond? Moshe Topaz is an Israeli member of the Knesset, or Parliament, with the centrist opposition party Yesh Atid. He's also a member of the Israeli Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Welcome to NewsHour. How would you like the government to respond to Iran's attack?
Well, I think we have to remember this isn't the first attack on Israel. Israel has attacked for 360 days since the 7th of October. And this has been the second missile launch at Israel by Iran. The first one was at 14th of April. And we managed to stop most of the missiles that time and this time too with the help of our allies in the West. So this is the only democracy in the Middle East fighting two huge terror organizations, the Hezbollah and Hamas, who are led by Iran. And Iran has to pay the consequences of its deeds. So I think Israel has to, we will have to act very harshly in order to protect not only Israel, but all the Western world, because Iran is an aggressive country, and the minute she sees we're weak, she will act again and again, not only against Israel, but also against all democracies in the world.
Well, what does that mean in practice, in your view?
In my view, as our soldiers are defending our people in the Gaza Strip as we speak, and as they are fighting Hezbollah terror organization in Lebanon, we will have to fight Iran too, by all means and by all, in all the ways we can. And that means we have to attack back, and not leave Iran as the only aggressor in this fight. This will have to mean, and we hope, we'll see England and France and the United States and other Western countries fighting with us against extreme Islam.
Does that include going after Iran's nuclear facilities at this stage?
I would think so, yes, but that's yet to be decided. I think nuclear Iran is a real threat to all the world, to all people. My father was a young man in the Second World War when missiles were shot by the Nazis towards London and other cities in the UK. Today, Israel is one of the only two countries in the Western world that are fighting for their life. Ukraine is the second one. Now, if you don't stand with those countries, you're the next. So I do think we will have to attack any aggressor, and Iran will have to be on a very high priority of the Western world in the coming months. Yes.
What is the longer-term strategy, though? The former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett talked about a once-in-a-50-year opportunity to, as he put it, change the face of the Middle East. Is that how you see it?
I hope we have here a threat and an opportunity. The threat, as we see it on an everyday basis, we had a deadly terror attack yesterday in Tel Aviv. 7 people were killed by 2 terrorists coming from the city of Hebron. So this is our everyday reality. I think what Israel has to show Iran at the moment that it can't go without punishment, and that's not only for Israel to do, it's for the whole Western world.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but even if that invites a much bigger Iranian attack, I'm just wondering, will any of this make Israel safer in the months and years to come?
Well, Israel isn't safe as long as it's attacked and doesn't respond. So yes, I do think when you are attacked, you have to attack back. And that means Iran will have to pay a very big payment in order to learn that aggression doesn't pay. And that's something that all aggressors around the world, and the extreme Islam has to learn. That it doesn't go without payment, you pay for your deeds. And that's something I think we expect all the Western countries, all democracies around the world, to be allies at this point.
Mr. Topaz, thank you very much indeed. Moshe Topaz, Israeli member of the Knesset with the opposition party Yesh Atid. We will be returning to this story in the second half of the program, and in particular we're going to be talking about how Israel's missile defences cope with that barrage and what also that means for the future of those defences. Let me also tell you there are constant updates as ever on the live page running on our website, bbc.com/news. You're listening to News App from the BBC World Service. Please stay with us.
Distribution of the BBC NewsHour in the U.S. is supported by BetterHelp, committed to making mental well-being a priority and offering support in taking on everything life demands, with therapists available to communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. And Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, our lead Eric Adams reporter Elizabeth Kim will join us as usual on Wednesdays after the mayor's Tuesday news conference. This week it's the first one since the mayor was indicted for alleged acts of corruption. We'll have excerpts and invite your calls. Also excerpts from and your reactions to the vice presidential debate. The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Swan Ocean Galleries, with the sale of African-American art on October 3rd, including a painting by Suzanne Jackson from the collection of Basketball Hall of Famer Bill Russell, as well as a sculpture by Elizabeth Catlett. More at swangalleries.com or on the Swan Galleries app.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
This is WNYC in New York. I'm David First. 60 degrees. It's 9:31. Mayor Adams held his first City Hall press conference since his indictment on federal corruption charges. WNYC's Elizabeth Kim was there.
Adams has made his weekly press conferences a performance ritual. There's his signature walk-on music and a procession of top aides who join him for the back and forth with reporters. But just about a week after his indictment, Adams changed the regular choreography. He walked to the steps of City Hall's rotunda alone, without any aides or music.
First of all, just want to let all of you know all this is going in my book.
It was a reminder of the mayor's legal and political crises, multiple ongoing federal investigations, resignations by several top aides, and historically low approval ratings. Adams was asked multiple times how he can run the city while defending himself in court. He'll have his initial court hearing later today.
The town of South Brunswick in Middlesex County, New Jersey, has agreed to a deal with housing advocates to create 1,500 new affordable homes over the next 10 years. If approved by a judge, the settlement between the town and nonprofit group the Fair Share Housing Center would end a 9-year court battle over how much affordable housing should be built in South Brunswick. Town attorney Francis Womack says the town and its residents are ready to put the legal fight behind them.
So we're very relieved now that we're able to move forward in a way that's good for the residents.
The deal comes just weeks before state officials are set to announce new affordable housing development requirements for all towns in the Garden State. to be built over the next 10 years. 60 degrees now in New York City. It will be partly sunny today, a high of 68. Tomorrow, mostly sunny with a high of 72.
You're listening to the news. More on our top story in just a few minutes. But first, let's hear from Bosnia, where organisations are making a fresh effort to find the remains of more than 7,000 people who are still missing following the war in the 1990s. They're also working to identify almost 2,000 bodies lying unclaimed in the country's mortuaries. But as our Balkan correspondent Guy Delorny reports, it is a delicate task.
Every summer, a few more victims of the Srebrenica massacre are laid to rest. This year, 14 people were buried at Potocari Cemetery, close to the site of the atrocity. Bosnian Serb forces systematically murdered around 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys at Srebrenica in July 1995. The remains of around 800 victims have yet to be found.
Not to have that place where you can pay a tribute to your loved ones, it is really hard.
Mirela Osmanovic works at the Srebrenica Memorial Center. Her two teenage brothers, Velid and Ahmedin, both died in the massacre 2 years before she was born.
The process of finding their bones and accepting what happened, what was committed, was a really long process. We have buried one of my brothers in 2006 and another one in 2008. Even today, like almost 30 years after the genocide, we have families that didn't find their loved ones.
This is where some of the work to change that is taking place. Workers in Visoko mortuary sift through human remains. They extract DNA samples and find any physical clues that could help with identity. It's grim, painstaking work, but it may help match the bodies with families desperate to find their relatives.
Bosnia has done a lot, but nevertheless, approximately 7,000 persons remain missing from the conflict.
Matthew Holliday is the Programme Director in Europe for ICMP, the International Commission on Missing Persons. His organisation is taking part in a new blood testing campaign to ensure remains have been identified accurately.
It's this issue of misidentification that occurred when DNA was not used as the primary method of identification, which then has this knock-on consequence of large numbers of unidentified remains in the mortuaries. If you provide blood, you can only help another family resolve potentially their missing persons case.
The drive to obtain blood samples offers hope for thousands of families who remain in the dark. Zakia Begovic chairs the Missing Persons Association in the town of Iliash. She's still hoping for news of her husband, son, and 7 other family members.
Our whole life is painful, I have to say. We somehow begin to doubt whether we will ever be able to locate them.
A report from Bosnia by our Balkans correspondent Guy Delorny. You're listening to News Hour, live from the BBC in London. I'm James Menendez. Well, let's return to our main story today. The aftermath of Iran's barrage of missiles fired into Israel last night. What exactly happened and what might, in military terms, happen next? Fabian Hinz is a defense analyst specializing in Iran and the Middle East at the IISS, the International Institute for Strategic Studies. He joins us on the line from Berlin. Thanks very much for being with us today. Thinking about what happened last night, I mean, is it a story of ineffective Iranian missiles or a very effective Israeli missile defense system?
So I would say so far we don't know. When you look at the history of Iranian strikes against Israel, it's a pretty new phenomenon. They never attacked Israel directly. They always used non-state actors allied to them. And now we saw 2 major Iranian strikes against Israel. The first in April, in retaliation for the Israeli bombing of a consulate. That strike, we now know, seems to have failed. Iran launched a huge number of munitions, but most of them were intercepted. With this strike, it's a little less clear so far. They seem to have made some changes to make their strike more effective in terms of quality and quantity. And we do have quite a few videos showing missiles getting through, not being intercepted. Now, how much damage did it cause? Apparently there were no fatalities. But in terms of physical damage, we will really have to wait for the satellite imagery to have an independent assessment of how much damage it caused.
But in this latest attack, these were what? Ballistic missiles that Iran fired, and what, these travel very fast and are presumably quite difficult to intercept.
So, yes, exactly, they were ballistic missiles. Back in April, you had a force mix, a combined strike of long-range suicide drones, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. This was always the Iranian strategy. You would fire them for simultaneous impact with the idea to overwhelm enemy defenses. Now, the issue here is that these drones, these UAVs, are quite slow. They take hours to reach Israel from Iran. With ballistic missiles, you're talking about a few minutes. So if you launch a combined strikes with UAVs and cruise missiles, it gives the enemy quite a lot of advance warning time and time to prepare. Now they did only fire ballistic missiles. And I think that was one of the lessons they learned in April, that they want to give the adversary less time to prepare. And that's why they only launched ballistic missiles, but this time a larger number of them. These are difficult to intercept, but Israel has quite a few capable systems to defend against.
Let me ask you about that. What is the system that intercepts those missiles? Because we hear a lot about Israel's Iron Dome, but I think that's slightly different, isn't it?
Yes, it is indeed. So the thing to know is that the further a missile travels, the faster it gets and the more difficult it becomes to intercept. Because of that, Israel has a layered system. It has different systems for different categories of missiles. So for really short-range rockets, but also against slow-flying drones and cruise missiles, you can use Iron Dome. That is used for rockets coming out of Gaza, for example, or some of the rockets coming from Lebanon. Then you have David Sling, which is one tier above, so it can intercept very short-range ballistic missiles coming from Syria or Lebanon.